Addendum. On her wedding day, she's brutally left at the altar. Dressed in her wedding gown, humiliated and heartbroken, she weeps alone in a corner of the church, while the guests whisper and society judges her. Amidst the chaos, he, the best man, witnesses the cruelty. Gabriel, a cold and disillusioned tycoon, is struck by her pain and despair. Driven by a protective instinct, he kneels, embraces her, and in that comforting hug, something unexpected happens. Watch this story to the end. You'll be surprised. If you like love stories, romance, subscribe to this channel, leave a comment. We post videos like this every day. Continuing. The reflection of the white dress danced in the full-length mirror, but Isabella Izzy Santos could barely recognize the woman staring back. At 28, she had dreamed of this moment since. She was a little girl, the perfect day, the perfect man, the perfect life that would finally begin. Her hands trembled as she adjusted her veil for the 10th time, trying to ignore the knot growing in her stomach. "You look beautiful, honey," murmured her mother, Carmen, her eyes welling up. "Ryan is a lucky man." Izzy forced a smile. Ryan Mendez, her fiancé of 2 years, was indeed considered a catch. A successful lawyer, traditional family from Chicago, a promising future. Everything her parents dreamed of for her. So why did she feel like she was suffocating? A few miles away in his office atop a skyscraper on Michigan Avenue, Gabriel Almeida watched the city through the bulletproof glass. At 37, he commanded a financial empire that spanned 3 continents. Powerful men trembled before. His desk, multi-million-dollar deals depended on his approval, but at that moment all he felt was a familiar void. His assistant knocked on the door. "Mr. Almeida, the car is waiting. Dr. Ryan's wedding is in an hour." Gabriel sighed, adjusting his impeccable tuxedo. Ryan was a college buddy, one of the few who had remained in his life after his meteoric rise in the business world. Being the best man should be an honor, but Gabriel couldn't remember the last time he had felt genuine joy for something. "5 minutes," he replied, turning back to the window. The emptiness in his chest was nothing new. It had started 6 years ago when he discovered that his then-fiancée, Helena, had cheated on him with his own partner. Not only was his heart broken, his empire almost collapsed with it. Since then, Gabriel had built even higher walls around himself. Trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. At the Sacred Heart Church, the guests began to settle in. Izzy arrived, punctually, escorted by her father, a simple man who had worked his entire life as an accountant to provide his daughter with a decent education. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her nerves. "Where's Ryan?" whispered one of the bridesmaids, looking around. The priest approached the family, his face tense. "We need to talk," he said softly to Carmen. Gabriel arrived at the venue and immediately noticed the commotion. Guests were whispering, nervous glances were directed at the empty altar. Where the hell was Ryan? His phone vibrated, a text from Ryan that made his blood run cold. "I can't do this, Gabriel. I'm at O'Hare. Take care of Izzy for me." For a moment, Gabriel stood still, processing the cowardice of the man he considered a friend. Then, his attention turned to the bride. Izzy was standing at the beginning of the aisle, the bouquet trembling in her hands, as cruel whispers began to spread through the church like wildfire. He ran. What a disgrace to the family. Always thought it was too good to be true. Gabriel saw the exact moment when reality hit Izzy. Her eyes widened, her face paled, and she staggered, as if she had been punched. Carmen rushed to support her, but Izzy shrugged her off, her wounded pride preventing her from collapsing publicly. I need a moment," she murmured, lifting the hem of her dress and walking quickly towards the back of the church. Gabriel followed her instinctively, finding her in the small backyard garden, leaning against an old oak tree. The sobs she had tried to contain finally exploded, tearing through the silence of the afternoon. The dream dress, which had cost her parents' life savings, was stained with dirt and tears. "He left me," she whispered to no one. "In front of everyone, like trash." Gabriel remained motionless for a moment, watching this woman he barely knew fall apart. Something in his chest, something he thought had died years ago, stirred with a sharp pain. It wasn't just pity. It was recognition. Her pain echoed his own. Without a word, he approached, took off his tuxedo jacket, and gently covered Izzy's trembling shoulders. She looked up, surprised, meeting grey eyes that for a moment reflected a deep understanding. "He didn't deserve you," said Gabriel, his voice softer than he had ever heard it, and at that moment, under the shadow of the tree and the weight of humiliation, two broken hearts recognized each other, unknowingly taking the first step towards a journey that would transform both their lives forever. Izzy looked up at Gabriel, still in shock. Through her tears, she managed to recognize the best man, the imposing man Ryan always mentioned, with a mixture of admiration and intimidation. Gabriel Almeida, the tycoon who turned numbers into empires and who never smiled in the photos in the business section. I should go back there and explain," she stammered, trying to compose herself. "My parents, the guests." "You don't owe anyone anything," replied Gabriel, his voice firm but gentle. "His cowardice, not yours." There was something in the way he spoke that made Izzy stop trembling, a natural authority that strangely did not intimidate her, but reassured her. Gabriel held out a silk handkerchief, and when their fingers touched briefly, they both felt an unexpected electric current. "I don't even really know your name," murmured Izzy, trying to smile through her tears. "Ryan always talked about Gabriel, but Gabriel Almeida," he said, and for the first time in years he didn't mention his companies or achievements. "And you are Isabella Santos. Ryan talked about you a lot." A lie. Ryan rarely mentioned his fiancée, always more interested in discussing business or impressing Gabriel with his ambitions, but Gabriel wasn't going to hurt her more than she already was. A murmur coming from the church interrupted them. Carmen appeared in the backyard garden, her face red with embarrassment and anger. "Izzy, honey, we need to decide what to do." "The guests. Some are already leaving. Others want to know if we're still serving dinner." She stopped when she noticed Gabriel. "Mr. Almeida, thank you for taking care of her." Gabriel nodded respectfully. "Mrs. Santos, if you'll allow me, I'd like to help with the reception costs. It's the least I can do for Ryan's irresponsibility." "No!" Izzy exclaimed, louder than she intended. Her wounded pride spoke louder. "We don't need charity. It's humiliating. Enough as it is." Gabriel studied her for a moment. He recognized the wounded pride, the same one he had carried after Helena's betrayal. The difference was that he had the power to get revenge. Izzy only had her dignity. "It's not charity," he said calmly. "It's responsibility. I brought Ryan into your life. Indirectly, I'm to blame for this." "How so?" asked Carmen, confused. Gabriel hesitated. The truth was that 2 years ago, Ryan had asked his opinion about a special girl. Gabriel, distracted with business, barely paid attention, just mumbling something about, "if she makes you happy." If he had investigated his friend's character better, maybe. "I just feel responsible," he repeated. In the days that followed, the story of the runaway groom spread through Chicago's social circles like wildfire. Izzy locked herself at home, ignoring calls from reporters and nosy neighbors. Her small flower shop, which was already struggling to survive, began to lose customers. Some people avoided greeting her on the street, others looked at her with pity. Gabriel, in turn, found himself thinking about her at inopportune moments. During important meetings, he remembered her tearful brown eyes. At night, in his silent mansion, he heard echoes of the sobs she had tried to contain. He tried to locate her discreetly. He discovered that she lived in a modest apartment in Wicker Park with her parents, that she worked with flowers, ironically, arrangements for weddings, and that she was facing financial difficulties. The money spent on the failed wedding had drained the family savings. 2 weeks after the incident, Gabriel decided to act. He arrived at the small flower shop Petals and Dreams in a discreet Jaguar, causing a stir on the quiet street. Izzy was arranging roses when she saw him enter, and her heart skipped a beat inexplicably. "Mr. Almeida, what are you doing here?" He looked around, noticing the delicate beauty of the arrangements, the care with which each flower was positioned. "I need flowers for a company event. I heard you do the best work in town." Izzy stared at him, suspicious. "I'm sure there are larger florists that meet your needs. But I don't want larger. I want the best." His grey eyes held her in place. "Would you do the job?" It was clearly a pretense to help her, but Izzy desperately needed the money. Her mother was having health problems, the bills were piling up, and the shame of the failed wedding still kept customers away. "What kind of event?" she asked, professional. "A business dinner, 50 guests, next Saturday?" Gabriel paused. "You would have to oversee the decoration on site, make sure everything is perfect." Izzy hesitated. This would mean entering his world, meeting people who had probably already heard about her public humiliation. But the amount he offered, too generous for a simple job, was impossible to refuse. "Okay," she agreed, extending her hand to seal the deal. When Gabriel touched her again, they both felt the same electric current as before. This time, however, neither of them immediately pulled away. For a moment, suspended in time, they were just a man and a woman recognizing each other through their shared wounds. "Saturday at 7, murmured Gabriel, reluctant to let go of her hand. "At 7, agreed Izzy, already knowing that she had accepted much more than just a job. The business dinner at Gabriel's penthouse was a revelation for Izzy. She arrived 2 hours before the guests, carrying boxes of arrangements that had consumed an entire week of work. White orchids mixed with exotic foliage created a sophisticated but welcoming atmosphere. Gabriel watched her work, fascinated by the precision of her movements. Each flower was positioned as if it were a brushstroke on a canvas. Izzy had traded her casual clothes for a simple and elegant black dress that highlighted her natural beauty, but it was her absolute concentration that hypnotized him. "Where did you learn this?" he asked, approaching as she adjusted a centerpiece. "From my grandmother," replied Izzy without looking up. "She said that flowers have a soul of their own, that you have to listen to them to know where they want to be." "Seems too poetic for the business world," commented Gabriel, a hint of irony in his voice. Izzy finally looked at him. "Then why did you hire me? There are larger companies, more suited to your standards." Gabriel hesitated. The truth was that he couldn't get Izzy out of his thoughts, but admitting that would be acknowledging a vulnerability that he couldn't allow himself. "I like to bet on underestimated talent," he lied partially. The guests began to arrive, executives, politicians, socialites. Izzy noticed how everyone addressed Gabriel with a mixture of reverence and caution. He was clearly respected, but there was something else. Fear, maybe. During dinner, she remained discreetly in the background, supervising the service. That's when she overheard a conversation between two elegant women near the bar. "He hasn't brought anyone since Helena," murmured one of them, looking in Gabriel's direction. "Of course not. After that scandal, who would be crazy enough to get involved with Gabriel Almeida? The man destroys whoever betrays him." Izzy felt a chill. Who was Helena? And what had happened? Later, when the last guests left, Gabriel found Izzy collecting the remaining arrangements. The terrace was silent, only the distant murmur of the city below. "You don't need to clean up," he said. "I have staff for that." "I like to take care of my work personally," she replied, avoiding his gaze. Gabriel approached, picking up an orchid that had fallen. "How do you do it?" "Do what?" "Create beauty even after—" He stopped, the words caught in his throat. "Even after being publicly humiliated," Izzy finished, a subtle bitterness in her voice. "Because flowers don't lie, Mr. Almeida. They just are what they are. They don't pretend to be something different to impress anyone." Gabriel studied her in silence. There was something in the way she spoke that touched an old wound in his chest. "Gabriel," he said softly. "Just Gabriel. I think we're past the formality." Izzy nodded, packing away the last vase. "Gabriel, then. Thank you for the opportunity. The payment will help me a lot." "Izzy." He hesitated, fighting against his controlled nature. "Would you like to have dinner with me? Tomorrow. Somewhere simple, not a work event. Just dinner." She stopped, surprised. "Why?" "Because in 3 hours, you've said more truths than I've heard in months of business meetings." Izzy stared at him, searching for signs of lies or pity. She found only sincerity, which somehow scared her more than any lie. I don't know if it's a good idea," she murmured. "Why not?" "Because people like you and me live in different worlds, Gabriel. What happened at my wedding made that very clear." Gabriel took a step forward, and Izzy could smell his masculine cologne, a blend of sandalwood and power. "Maybe," he said, his voice lower. "That's exactly why we should try. Different worlds sometimes complement each other." For a moment, Izzy almost gave in. There was something magnetic about this man, an intensity that awakened sensations she thought had died after Ryan's betrayal. But then she remembered the women's words. "The man destroys whoever betrays him." "I need to go," she said, grabbing her purse quickly. "Izzy, wait." She turned at the elevator door. "Gabriel, I appreciate everything you've done, but I'm afraid of getting hurt again. And you have a reputation that doesn't suit someone like me." "What reputation?" "For being ruthless with those who disappoint you." Gabriel stood still, her words echoing in the silence of the empty terrace. Helena. Even after 6 years, the consequences of that betrayal still haunted him. In the elevator, Izzy leaned against the wall, her heart racing. There was something in the way Gabriel had looked at her that had awakened a hunger she didn't even know she possessed. But she had also heard the whispers. Gabriel Almeida was a dangerous man to love. What she didn't know was that at that exact moment, 3 floors below in the parking garage, a photographer from the gossip column had captured her leaving the building. The next morning, the photo would plaster the tabloids with the headline, "The lonely tycoon has a new companion." From that moment on, neither Gabriel nor Izzy would have the luxury of privacy, and the ghosts of both their pasts would begin to awaken. The photo splashed across the front page of the gossip column the next day. Izzy found out when her neighbor, Mrs. Rosa, knocked on her door at 7 in the morning, holding the newspaper with wide eyes. "Honey, you need to see this," she said, handing her the publication. The image showed Izzy leaving Gabriel's building, carrying a box of flowers. The angle suggested intimacy, complicity. The headline was devastating. "The Jilted Bride" and the B. Tycoon, romance after humiliation. The flower shop's phone began to ring incessantly. Reporters, nosy Parkers, some friends feigning concern. Izzy unplugged the phone, but she couldn't escape the stares on the street. Whispers followed her like shadows. Gabriel found out about the photo during a meeting with Japanese investors. His press secretary, Ricardo, entered the room with the newspaper and a grim expression. "Sir, we have a problem," he murmured, showing him the publication. Gabriel felt a cold rage rise in his chest, not for the exposure, he was used to the press, but for Izzy. She had already suffered enough humiliation. "Get it pulled," he ordered. "Sir, that will only draw more attention. The best thing is—" "I said get it pulled, now." On Thursday, the situation worsened. Izzy was closing the shop when 3 men approached. The leader, a guy in a cheap suit and a predatory look, introduced himself as Marcelo Silva from the Evening News. "Miss Santos, we'd like to talk about your relationship with Gabriel Almeida." "I have no relationship with him," replied Izzy, trying to lock the door. "That's not what it looks like in this photo," insisted Marcelo, blocking her exit. "Our readers are curious. The woman abandoned at the altar is now comforted by the richest man in the city. It's an interesting story." "Let me pass," said Izzy, her voice trembling. "Just a few questions. Is he paying for your services? What kind of arrangements do you make besides flowers?" The insinuation was clear and humiliating. Izzy felt her blood boil, but before she could respond, an icy voice cut through the air. "I believe she asked you to step away." Gabriel appeared as if he had materialized from the shadows, imposing and menacing. His grey eyes gleamed with a contained fury that made the reporters recoil instinctively. "Mr. Almeida," stammered Marcelo, "we just wanted to—" "I know exactly what you wanted," cut in Gabriel, approaching, "and now you're leaving, before I decide to sue you for harassment." The men scattered quickly, but Marcelo couldn't resist one last comment. "The truth always comes out, Almeida, and everyone knows what happens to those who mess with you." Gabriel stepped forward, but Izzy held his arm. "It's not worth it," she whispered. Her touch stopped him immediately. Gabriel looked down, seeing her delicate fingers on his arm, and felt something crumble inside him. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice surprisingly soft. Izzy nodded, but he could see the tears contained in her eyes. "I should have imagined this would happen. Something always happens when I start to recover." "This is not your fault," said Gabriel, his anger returning. "It's mine. I should have been more careful." "It's better if we stay away from each other," murmured Izzy, searching for the shop keys with trembling hands. "Before it's too late." "Too late for what?" She looked at him, and Gabriel saw in those brown eyes a vulnerability that mirrored his own. "For me not to get attached to you." The Jew confession hung in the air between them. Gabriel felt his world tilt dangerously. For 6 years, he had kept all women at a distance, but Izzy had already bypassed his defenses without even trying. "Izzy." "No," she shook her head. "I know who you are, Gabriel. I've heard the comments. You destroy those who disappoint you, and I'm not strong enough to survive another betrayal." Gabriel stood still. Helena. It always came back to Helena. "You want to know about Helena?" he asked, his voice dangerously low. Izzy stared at him, surprised by the abrupt change. "She was my fiancée 6 years ago. I found out she was cheating on me with my partner a week before the wedding. She not only cheated on me, she stole confidential company information to pass on to competitors." Gabriel paused, his jaw tight. "I didn't just break up with her. I destroyed both of their careers. I ruined their lives financially. I don't regret it." Izzy stepped back slightly, but he continued. "But you're not. Helena, Izzy, and He hesitated, fighting years of self-control. "I'm not the same man I was 6 years ago." At that moment, a van with another newspaper's logo turned the corner. Gabriel saw it first. "Shit," he muttered. "More reporters." Without thinking, he grabbed Izzy's hand. "Come with me, now." "Gabriel, trust me." Izzy looked into his eyes and saw something that made her nod. Gabriel pulled her towards his car, but before they could get in, the photographers were already flashing cameras. The questions came like machine gun fire. Are you dating? Gabriel, is she a serious relationship? Izzy, what's it like dating the richest man in Chicago? Gabriel shielded Izzy with his body, helping her into the car. But at the last moment, before closing the door, one of the reporters shouted, "Is it true that you're living together in his mansion?" Gabriel froze. The lie would be headline news the next day, and from then on, there would be no turning back. Izzy's reputation would be associated with his forever, for better or for worse. He looked at Izzy, who was pale in the passenger seat, and made the decision that would change everything. "No comment," he said, getting into the car and speeding off, but they both knew that the silence had been interpreted as confirmation. And now, whether they wanted to or not, they were linked in the eyes of all of Chicago. From that moment on, every move would be watched, every gesture interpreted, every decision would have consequences that neither of them could control. Gabriel's mansion in Lake Forest was a haven of glass and steel, nestled among meticulously planned gardens. Izzy never imagined she would set foot in a place like this, but circumstances gave her no choice. After the chase by the reporters, Gabriel had brought her there until things calmed down. That had been 3 days ago, and the situation had only gotten worse. "The press is camped out at your flower shop," reported Ricardo, Gabriel's press secretary, during breakfast. "And at your parents' house, too." Izzy let out a sigh of frustration. "This is ridiculous. I only did the arrangements for his event." "Unfortunately, the narrative has already been created," continued Ricardo, consulting his tablet. 3 gossip magazines are preparing special features. The title of one of them is "Modern Cinderella, From Humiliation to the Tycoon's Altar." Gabriel slammed his fist on the table, making the coffee cups tremble. "This has to stop, now." "Sir, the more we try to silence it, the more attention we'll attract. The only way to control the narrative is what?" asked Izzy, sensing that she wouldn't like the answer. Ricardo hesitated, looking at Gabriel. "To acknowledge the relationship, officially, a joint statement, some strategic public appearances. Turn the speculation into a real love story." "Absolutely not," said Izzy, standing up abruptly. "I'm not going to fake a relationship to satisfy the press." "Izzy," Gabriel approached her, his voice soft, "it's temporary, just until the interest dies down." She stared at him, seeing something in his eyes that she couldn't decipher. "And then, when we decide it's enough, how will we explain the breakup? More public humiliation for me?" Gabriel was silent, and Izzy understood that he didn't have an answer. That afternoon, while Gabriel was in meetings, Izzy explored the property's gardens. The beauty of the place was undeniable, but she felt like a gilded prisoner. That's when she found Margaret Almeida, Gabriel's mother, waiting for her in the gazebo. At 65, Margaret was an elegant woman who radiated authority. Her grey eyes, identical to her son's, studied Izzy with a calculating coldness. "So you're the famous Isabella Santos," she said without preamble. "Mrs. Almeida, I didn't know you were here." "Gabriel didn't know. I have my own keys." Margaret sat down gracefully, gesturing for Izzy to do the same. "We need to talk." Izzy sat down, her heart racing. "My son is a powerful man, but also vulnerable," began Margaret. "Helena's betrayal marked him deeply. It took him years to recover." "I understand, but—" "Do you understand?" Margaret interrupted her. "Really? Because from my point of view, you're a young opportunist who saw a chance to take advantage of Gabriel's kindness." Izzy felt her blood boil. "I never asked him for anything. It was Gabriel who insisted on helping me." "Of course it was. He's always had too soft a heart for women in distress." Margaret leaned forward. "But I don't have that weakness, and I know very well the type of woman you are." "What type?" "The type that uses tears and vulnerability to win over rich men. The type that turns humiliation into opportunity. The words hit Izzy like slaps. "You don't know me." "I know enough." Margaret opened her purse and took out an envelope. "That's why I came to make a proposal." Izzy looked at the envelope suspiciously. "What proposal?" $5 million for you to disappear from my son's life, move to another city, start a new life far from here. Izzy's world seemed to spin. "You're offering me money to leave Gabriel?" "I'm offering an elegant solution to a complicated problem. Gabriel is confusing gratitude with love, but that will pass, as it did with Helena. Gabriel told me about Helena. She betrayed him. I would never do that." Margaret laughed, a chilling sound. "That's exactly what Helena said. Until the day we discovered the bank transfers and the compromising emails." Izzy stood up abruptly. "I'm not Helena." "No, you're worse. Helena at least was from the same social class as Gabriel. You're a bankrupt florist who was abandoned at the altar. What future can you offer my son?" The words were like precise stabs. Izzy felt her eyes burn, but she didn't allow the tears to fall. "Gabriel can choose for himself," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Can he, even when he knows the truth about you?" Izzy froze. "What truth?" Margaret smiled, and it was a terrible smile. "Oh, honey, you thought I wouldn't investigate. I know about your father's debts. I know about your home's mortgage that is overdue. I know about the loans you took out to pay for the failed wedding." Izzy's heart sank. Her family had hidden the desperate financial situation to avoid worrying her after the public humiliation. "I also know," continued Margaret relentlessly, "about the money that Ryan embezzled from your joint account before running away. $50,000 that he stole, and that you still haven't had the courage to report." Izzy sat down heavily, the world collapsing around her. "Gabriel doesn't know any of this, does he?" Margaret watched the young woman's reaction. "He thinks you're just an innocent victim, but we both know that you desperately need money, and that my son appeared at the right time like a knight in shining armor." "It's not like that," whispered Izzy. "No. Then why didn't you tell him about your financial situation? Why didn't you mention that Ryan left you not only humiliated, but also ruined?" Izzy couldn't answer. The truth was that she was ashamed of her naivete, ashamed of having trusted Ryan even with the finances, ashamed of being broke at 28. "Think carefully, dear." Margaret stood up, leaving the envelope on the table. $5 million. It's more than you'd earn in a lifetime with your flowers. Or you can stay and see what happens when Gabriel finds out you've been lying to him from the start. Margaret walked away, leaving Izzy alone in the gazebo with the envelope and the crushing weight of the veiled blackmail. At that moment, she understood that she wasn't just fighting the press or social prejudices. She was fighting a woman who knew all her secrets and who would do anything to protect her son. And worst of all, Margaret was right. Izzy had omitted the truth about her financial situation. And when Gabriel found out, and he would find out, how could she explain that she wasn't the opportunist everyone thought she was? The envelope remained on the table untouched, while Izzy cried silently in the garden of the mansion that increasingly felt like a prison. Gabriel arrived home that night, finding Izzy on the terrace, looking at the city lights. There was something different about her, a tension, a distance that he couldn't identify. Margaret's envelope was hidden in her purse, but the weight of the blackmail followed her like a shadow. "How was your day?" he asked, approaching from behind. "Gabriel, we need to talk," she said, without turning around. Something in the tone of her voice alerted him. "About what?" "About us. About this situation." Izzy finally turned around, and Gabriel saw tears contained in her eyes. "This can't continue." "Izzy, I know it's been difficult, but no, you don't understand." She took a deep breath, gathering the courage for the lie she was about to tell. "I can't pretend this is real anymore." Gabriel recoiled as if he had been punched. Pretend you were kind to me when I needed it most. I'm grateful for that. But I can't live this fantasy anymore where this is, she gestured between them. Something real. Izzy, what are you talking about? I thought that... You thought what? That a bankrupt florist and a tycoon could have something real? The cruelty in her own voice hurt her, but Margaret's words echoed in her mind. I need to go back to my real life. Gabriel studied her for a long moment. Is this about the money? Because if you need... No. The reaction was more violent than she intended. It's not about money! But it was. It was exactly about money, about the debts she had omitted, about Ryan stealing her savings, about the overdue mortgage on her parents' house. It was about Margaret being right. She was lying to Gabriel from the beginning. The next morning, while Gabriel was at the office trying to process the conversation of the previous night, Ricardo entered his room with a grim expression. Sir, we have a serious problem. Gabriel looked up from the documents. Not now, Ricardo. It's about Ms. Santos. Ricardo placed a tablet on the desk. The show, Gossip and Truth, is airing in 2 hours. They got hold of compromising information. Gabriel picked up the tablet, seeing a preview of the story. His expression darkened with each line he read. Exclusive. The true story of the florist who won over the tycoon. Discover the financial secrets that Isabella Santos hid from Gabriel. Almeida, is the love real or just self-interest? How did they get this? Asked Gabriel, his voice dangerously low. Someone with access to privileged information leaked everything. The family's debts, the money Ryan embezzled, the desperate financial situation. Gabriel closed his eyes. Margaret. It could only be his mother. And there's more, continued Ricardo hesitantly. They have a recording. What recording? Ricardo pressed play on the tablet. Izzy's voice echoed in the room, clear and painful. You were kind to me when I needed it most. I'm grateful for that. But I can't live this fantasy anymore. A bankrupt florist and a powerful tycoon. I need to go back to my real life. Gabriel felt something shatter inside him. The recording had been edited, taken out of context, but the words were real. Izzy had confirmed everything he had always feared, that she saw him only as a means to escape her problems. Who recorded this? He asked, although he already knew the answer. We don't know for sure, but... Gabriel didn't hear the rest. He grabbed his car keys and left, leaving Ricardo talking to himself. He found Izzy at the flower shop, packing her things. She looked up when he entered, and Gabriel saw guilt and despair in her eyes. You knew, he said, his voice cutting like ice. About the show, Izzy nodded, unable to speak. And about the debts, about Ryan stealing your money, about your family being broke. Each question was a stab. You've lied about everything since day one. Gabriel, I can explain. Explain. Explain how. You had weeks to tell me the truth. Weeks where I believed that, where I thought that you... He stopped, refusing to admit how attached he had become to her. I was ashamed, whispered Izzy, tears running down her face. Ashamed of having been so naive, of having lost everything, of being broke. I didn't want you to see me as an opportunist, as someone who approached me for the money. No, it was never about money. Then why did you lie? Gabriel advanced, his grey eyes blazing. Why did you omit all this if you had nothing to hide? Izzy couldn't answer because Margaret was right. She had omitted the truth, and now she looked exactly what she wasn't, a desperate woman who took advantage of a rich man's kindness. I fell in love with you, she said finally, her voice breaking. I really fell in love, and that's why I couldn't tell you, because I knew that when you found out you'd think exactly what you're thinking now. Gabriel laughed, a bitter sound. Fell in love? Or fell in love with what I could do for you, with the security I could offer? How can you say that? Because I've lived this before, Izzy. Helena also said she loved me until we discovered the bank transfers. I'm not Helena, no. So why does it feel exactly the same? The lying, the secrets, the discovery of the truth. Gabriel approached, and Izzy could see the pain behind the anger. You know what hurts the most? It's not even the fact that you lied. It's the fact that I believed you were different. Gabriel, please. No. He turned away, heading for the door. I was an idiot to think that you could really care about someone like me. Someone like you? He turned back, and Izzy saw a raw vulnerability in his eyes. Someone who doesn't know who to trust anymore. Someone who's built walls so high that maybe he'll never be able to connect with another person for real. Gabriel left, leaving Izzy alone among the flowers that now seemed dead. Outside, she could hear the roar of his car driving away, taking with it any hope that they could overcome this. 2 hours later, the show aired. The headlines spread across the internet like wildfire. The Cinderella Scam, how a bankrupt florist fooled tycoon Gabriel Almeida. Izzy watched from her house while her life was dissected on national television. Every intimate detail of her financial ruin was exposed. Every omission was presented as evidence of her manipulative nature. But what destroyed her the most was the last part of the show, where they showed Gabriel arriving. Home alone, his face closed off, refusing to comment. The narration said, "Once again, Gabriel Almeida has been the victim of an opportunistic woman. Once again, the most powerful man in Chicago has discovered that love comes at a price." That night, Izzy packed her bags, not to run away with Margaret's money. The envelope remained untouched in her drawer, but because she knew that her presence would only bring more pain to Gabriel. She had lost not only the man she had fallen in love with, but also her reputation, her dignity, and any chance of starting over in Chicago. And worst of all, she knew that Gabriel would never believe in true love again. She had been the second woman to shatter his faith in love, and that was something she would never forgive herself for. 2 weeks had passed since Izzy had left Chicago. She had taken refuge in the small town of Lake Geneva, at a distant inn, trying to piece her life back together. The mornings were spent hiking in the mountains, the afternoons helping with small floral arrangements for tourists. It was a simple existence, but the pain remained raw. It was during one of these hikes that she ran into Fernanda, her old college friend, now an investigative journalist in Chicago. "Izzy, oh my God, what are you doing here?" Fernanda rushed to hug her. "When I saw the news, I don't want to talk about it," cut in Izzy, but Fernanda saw beyond the words. "Issa, I've known you for 10 years. That woman who appeared on TV isn't you. Never has been." Fernanda held her by the shoulders. "Something isn't right about this. Whole story." Later at the inn, Fernanda listened attentively as Izzy told the whole truth about Margaret, about the blackmail, about how she had chosen to step aside to protect Gabriel from more scandal. "You're an idiot," said Fernanda bluntly, "but a brave idiot, and that Margaret is a calculating viper. It doesn't matter anymore. Gabriel will never believe me." "Maybe not. But are you going to give up like that? Are you going to let them destroy your reputation without a fight?" Fernanda stood up, her eyes shining. "Issa, I'm an investigative journalist. My specialty is uncovering the truth behind the lies, and this whole story smells like manipulation." "Fernanda, don't... Give me 3 days, just 3 days to investigate. If I don't find anything, you go back to your mountain life. But if I find evidence of what really happened, you fight." Meanwhile, in Chicago, Gabriel had buried himself in work. 16 hours a day at the office, mergers and acquisitions happening at a brutal pace. Ricardo had tried to talk to him several times about Izzy, but Gabriel refused to hear her name. It was Marcus, his driver of 15 years, who finally managed to break through his defenses. "Mr. Gabriel," said Marcus one night as they left the office, "can I say something?" Gabriel grumbled something that Marcus interpreted as consent. "I drove Miss Isabella a few times. I observed her." Marcus chose his words carefully. "She never asked about your money, never asked to stop at expensive stores, never seemed impressed with the cars or the mansion." Marcus. "In fact, she seemed uncomfortable with it all, like she didn't belong." Marcus paused. Mrs. Helena, on the other hand, always asked to stop at Cartier. Gabrielle was silent, but Marcus saw that he had planted a seed of doubt. In Lake Geneva, Fernanda worked obsessively. 3 days turned into a week of intense investigation. She discovered that the show Gossip and Truth had received an anonymous package with all the information about Izzy. But the sender had used a courier service that required registration with ID. "I got it," she said, calling Izzy on Monday. "The package was sent by someone named Patricia Mendez. Does that name mean anything to you?" Izzy thought for a moment. "No, wait, Patricia Mendez. She works for Margaret Almeida. She's been her personal secretary for years." Bingo, but there's more. The excitement in Fernanda's voice was palpable. "I found out that Margaret has a history. She's done this before." "How so?" "Remember Helena, Gabriel's ex-fiancée? Well, I talked to some people who knew her. Helena wasn't lying about loving Gabriel." Izzy's heart stopped. "What?" "The evidence against Helena was planted. Margaret discovered that Gabriel's partner, the one who supposedly had an affair with Helena, owed a lot of money to loan sharks. Margaret paid off his debts in exchange. For collaboration, they created fake emails, fictitious bank transfers. Oh my God. Helena was destroyed because Margaret thought she wasn't suitable for her son. Low social class, simple family, exactly like you." Izzy felt nauseous. "She destroyed an innocent woman, and she was prepared to destroy you too. The difference is that you left the scene before she needed to go all the way." Fernanda paused. "Issa, I have proof. Emails between Margaret and Patricia, bank records of and payment to Gabriel's ex-partner, recordings of telephone conversations. How did you get this?" "Patricia had a guilty conscience. When I looked for her, she broke down. Said that Margaret forced her to leak your information, threatening to fire her and destroy her career. Patricia has a sick daughter. She needs the job." Fernanda's voice hardened. "Margaret Almeida is a psychopath. Manipulative psychopath who destroys lives to maintain control over her son." Isabella was silent, processing the information. "There's one more thing," continued Fernanda. "Gabriel is suffering. People close to him say he's not the same anymore. He's obsessed with work, doesn't leave the house, barely eats. Marcus, his driver, said that he's been asking about you discreetly." "Asking what?" "If you're okay where you are, if you need anything. He asked Marcus to find out your address in Lake Geneva, but he hasn't done anything with the information." Izzy's heart raced. "He knows where I am. For a week, but he hasn't come after you. I think he's afraid of more disappointment, or maybe he's waiting for you to take the initiative." Izzy walked to the window, looking at the mountains in the distance. "Fernanda, even with all this evidence, how will I convince him? He saw me lie about the debts, he heard the words I said." "Because now we know why you lied, and because Margaret is going to pay for what she did. Not just to you, but to Helena, too." The determination in Fernanda's voice was unwavering. "Issa, Margaret has done this before, and she'll do it again. How many women is she going to destroy to keep Gabriel alone and under control?" "Dale, what are you suggesting?" "That we go back to Chicago, that we confront Margaret with the evidence, and that you fight for the man you love." Fernanda paused. "But it has to be now, Issa, because I found out one more thing." "What?" "Margaret already has another candidate in mind. Camilla Whitman, daughter of an American tycoon. They have a dinner scheduled for tomorrow night. Margaret is arranging everything so that Gabriel meets her casually. Izzy closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the moment. She could stay in Lake Geneva, safe in her pain, or she could fight. She could let Margaret continue manipulating Gabriel's life, or she could expose the truth. "Fernanda," she said finally, "help me get back to Chicago. But we're not just going to confront Margaret. We're going to destroy her the same way she destroyed other women." "Now you're talking like the Izzy I know. What time does your bus leave?" "I'm not taking the bus," replied Izzy, a new determination in her voice. "I'm driving, and I'm going to get there in time to prevent Margaret from destroying another life." For the first time in weeks, Izzy smiled. Margaret Almeida had underestimated one crucial thing. When a woman in love decides to fight, she becomes unstoppable. The dinner at the Almeida mansion was in full swing when Izzy arrived. Through the illuminated windows, she could see Gabriel talking politely with an elegant blonde. Camilla Whitman, no doubt. Margaret circulated among the guests like a perfect hostess, orchestrating every moment. Fernanda stood beside her, carrying a folder with the evidence. "Are you sure about this?" "I've never been so sure of anything in my life," replied Izzy, adjusting the simple but elegant dress she had bought on the trip. "It's time for Margaret to pay for what she's done." They circled the property to the back entrance. Marcus, who had been informed by Fernanda, was waiting for them. "Miss Isabella," he said, clearly relieved. "He needs to know the truth. He hasn't been the same man since you left." "Thank you, Marcus, for everything." Izzy took a deep breath and entered the mansion, heading straight to the main hall. The conversations gradually ceased as her presence was noticed. Gabriel saw her first, and the glass in his hand trembled slightly. Margaret approached quickly, her face a mask of icy politeness. "Isabella, what an unexpected surprise. I'm afraid this is a private gathering." "I know exactly what it is," replied Izzy, her voice firm. "That's why I'm here." Gabriel approached, his eyes unable to leave her. "Izzy, what are you doing here?" "I came to tell the truth. The truth that your mother prevented me from telling 3 weeks ago." Margaret laughed, a crystalline and false sound. "Darling, you've already caused enough drama. Please don't turn an elegant evening into another one of your spectacles." "Spectacle?" Izzy turned to face Margaret. "Like the spectacle you orchestrated with Helena 6 years ago." The silence in the hall was absolute. Gabriel froze. "What are you talking about?" Fernanda stepped forward, opening the folder. "I'm talking about the evidence that proves that your mother destroyed Helena deliberately and that she tried to do the same thing to me." "This is ridiculous," said Margaret, but her voice lost its firmness. "Is it really?" Fernanda held out documents to Gabriel. "Here are the emails between your mother and Patricia Mendez, organizing the leak of information about Isabella. Here are the bank records showing that Margaret paid your ex-partner's debts in exchange for collaboration to incriminate Helena." Gabriel took the papers, his eyes scanning the pages. With each line, his expression darkened. "And here," continued Fernanda, turning on a recorder, "is Patricia confessing everything." Patricia's trembling voice echoed in the hall. "Mrs. Almeida forced me to leak the information about Miss Santos. She said that if I didn't, I would lose my job. I did the same thing to Helena years ago. I helped create false evidence because my daughter was sick and I needed the money." Margaret recoiled, her face pale. "Gabriel, I was just protecting you." "Protecting?" Gabriel raised his eyes from the documents, and Izzy had never seen so much contained fury. "You destroyed 2 innocent women. You destroyed my ability to trust, to love. They weren't good enough for you. Helena was an opportunist, and this," she pointed at Izzy, "this is a bankrupt florist who..." "Who what?" Gabriel's voice cut through the air like a knife. Who made me feel alive for the first time in 6 years? Who never asked anything of me? Who sacrificed herself to protect me from more scandal? He turned to Izzy, his gray eyes shining with raw emotion. Why didn't you tell me about the debts? Why didn't you tell me that Ryan had stolen your money? Izzy felt tears burn her eyes. Because I was ashamed. Ashamed of having been so naive, of being broke at 28. And because I knew that when you found out, you'd think exactly what you thought. That I was like Helena. But you weren't like Helena, said Gabriel, approaching. Helena was innocent too, wasn't she? My mother destroyed her just like she tried to destroy you. Margaret attempted one last play. Gabriel, you're being manipulated again. Can't you see that they planned this together? Gabriel stopped in front of Izzy, completely ignoring his mother. You lied about the debts because you were ashamed. But when my mother blackmailed you, when she offered you money to leave me, you refused, didn't you? Izzy nodded, unable to speak. And when you left me, it wasn't because you didn't love me. It was because you thought that by protecting me, you were sparing me from more public humiliation. I love you, whispered Izzy, the words coming out like a painful confession. I love you so much that I preferred to carry the guilt of having lied than to let your mother destroy your life again. Gabriel took her face in his hands. And I love you too. I've loved you since that first day in the church garden, when I saw your pain and recognized my own. I love you for the courageous woman you are, not for what you have or don't have. He turned to Margaret, who was pale and trembling. Mom, you didn't just destroy Helena and almost destroy Isabella. You robbed me of 6 years of a life that could have been happy, and you almost made me lose the only woman I've ever truly loved. Gabriel, you wanted to control me. You wanted to keep me alone and dependent on you. His voice was icy. Well, that ends here. Patricia will be rewarded for her courage in telling the truth, and you're going to step out of my life until you learn to respect my choices. Margaret tried to protest, but Gabriel had already turned to Izzy again. Can you forgive me, he asked, for having doubted you, for having let the past poison our present? Only if you forgive me for having lied about the debts, for not having trusted you enough to tell the truth. Gabriel smiled, the first real smile she had seen since their reunion. Considering that you lied out of love and I accused you out of fear, I think we're even. He kissed her then, right there in the hall in front of all the shocked guests. It was a kiss that sealed not only forgiveness, but a promise of a fresh start. When they broke apart, Gabriel took Izzy's hand. There's a question I've wanted to ask you for weeks. He knelt down right there, pulling a small box from his pocket. Izzy gasped, Isabella Santos, will you marry me? For real this time, no drama, no lies, no outside interference, just the two of us building a life together? Izzy laughed through her tears. Yes, 1,000 times yes. 6 months later, in a simple and intimate ceremony in Lake Geneva, surrounded only by people who truly loved them, Isabella and Gabriel were married. The flowers in the bouquet were arrangements she had made herself, simple but perfect. Margaret wasn't present. She had moved to Miami, where she was trying to rebuild her life away from the son who had finally learned to say no. Helena, on the other hand, was there. Gabriel had sought her out, apologized, and helped rebuild the reputation that his mother had destroyed. She was engaged to a college professor and radiant with happiness. During the ceremony, when Gabriel kissed his bride, Izzy whispered in his ear, "Thank you for saving me that day in the church." Gabriel smiled, holding her closer. "Thank you for saving me back, my love. Thank you for teaching me that true love is worth any fight." And under the blue sky of the mountains, surrounded by flowers and the scent of happiness, they finally began the life they had always deserved to have. A life built on truth, on forgiveness and on the certainty that some love stories are strong enough to survive any storm.